بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Inshallah, we'll continue. Today we are talking about hadith number 24, inshallah, which is on the screen now. This is where the Prophet ﷺ has said, لا تحاسدوا ولا تناجشوا ولا تباغضوا ولا تدابروا ولا يبع بعضكم على بيع بعض وكونوا عباد الله إخوانا. Which translates to, do not envy one another, do not artificially inflate prices against one another, do not hate one another, do not turn away from one another, do not undercut one another. Be, O slaves of Allah, brothers. This is actually part of a much longer hadith. But anyway, in this book, this is hadith number 24. So this hadith contains a number of prohibitions. Okay. So do not do this, and so on. And all of those things, they've been prohibited because they go against the rights of other Muslims. So each and every one of us has a right upon other people, and other people have rights upon us. So this hadith is talking about some of those. Now, it is not concise speech, which in some of the other hadith there is. The reason being because this one, and at sometimes, the Prophet ﷺ must go into detail and must specify some of the prohibitions, as is done here. So this is actually an elaboration of, like, if you look at the next hadith, it starts off with al-Muslimu akhul Muslim, which is the Muslim is the brother of his fellow Muslim. So this is now starting to explain and expand on that concept. So it shows us the importance of staying away from these. And in fact, the way the Prophet ﷺ has worded it, it means that committing those things would be haram. It's not permissible in Islam. And you will see the reason for it is these things and other things like it, they build enmity in the community. And one of the beauties about Islam is that it does not want any enmity, any infillings in the community, not the slightest. So the way our relationships are made in Islam with each other, they are done to not have problems in the first place. So it's not so much okay, we're getting into problems, it's always fixing a problem. That's also there, but Islam is heavily also into not having problems in the first place. And that's the way we should be in our life as well, so we should try and avoid getting into problem. So if we follow the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, such as this hadith, the next hadith, and so many others apart from these, then inshallah we would not get into trouble in this life, and we would not be hurting other people would not be hurting us, and the whole community would live in harmony. And we all know that's not the case, right? We all know that the community is full of problems. So you'll see when we go through these how we can start to identify some of the sources of the problems of the community. So the first one is about envy. Hadith shows that it is haram. Okay. Now, what does hasad actually mean? Hasad, the definition of it is that you want a person to lose a blessing of Allah. Now, worse than that, because like some people say, look, I'm only wanting, but I haven't taken the step. But the thing is, you wanting the blessing to go away from a person, that itself is hasad, that itself is envy. But worse than that is the second step, which is you striving to make that person lose that blessing. Now, this is still haram and still considered very bad, regardless of whether you want that blessing to come to you or if you just want that blessing to go away from that person. So you cannot defend yourself by saying, look, I'm not striving to make him or her lose the blessing. Or you cannot defend yourself by saying, I don't want that blessing, but I just want it to go away from the other person. all of that is still not acceptable. So we cannot, and remember, this is in your heart, this wanting a person to lose the blessing of Allah, it's actually not on your lips and not on your limbs. It first starts up in your heart. When it gets too much, then it comes on your lips, then it comes on your limbs, where you start to put an effort in, or you talk about it. But otherwise, hasad, envy, it's all in the heart. That's where it starts. That's where it really harbors, and that's where it can get really very big. So who knows our hearts? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to fear Him. So you can't be such a person, okay, you got a ton of jealousy inside you, lots of envy against other people, but you're able to control it such that it doesn't get to your limbs. And you can't say, oh, alhamdulillah, that's great, I'm not that bad. Yes, you might not be really bad, but you still, haven't done what is required of you, which is you cannot want a person to lose a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him or her with. Now, why is this very bad? Think about it. See, look at the definition of it. You want a person to lose a blessing of Allah. So Allah, from His divine decree and His mercy and His justice, has given a blessing to somebody else. And then who are you, who am I, who are any of us to go and, not like that or not want that for somebody else? So that's why it's not just a bad thing to have. It's actually pretty terrible, pretty, horrendous. It's like we are objecting to what Allah has decreed. We are objecting to what Allah has decided to do and what He has done. So it's really very, severe. And then the extra step of trying to make the other person lose a blessing, subhanAllah, that would be worst of the worst. So we need to stay away from this. Now, I've got a few examples of envy so that we can start to think whether we have succumbed to this, and if we have, we need to do something to rectify it immediately. So some examples are like, if somebody else gets a promotion at work or an increase in salary, then you start to feel something in your heart. That's jealousy. That you're not liking that about that person. You're probably thinking, why didn't I get that? Or perhaps you guys are colleagues at work, okay? You've been there longer and maybe you've been working harder, at least on face value. And the other person, your other colleague, gets a promotion or increase in salary and you don't. Or someone never gets sick. This can also happen. So you think you're always getting sick. Why is this other person never getting sick? That's also envy. We cannot have that. And imagine someone's got a very good car, or even if they've got a slightly old car, but the car never gives them any problem. Never had a problem in breakdowns, no accidents, no flat tires, nothing like that. But then you do. So then you thinking along those lines is not acceptable. And perhaps another person has memorized Quran, or they're very intelligent. They can memorize things very easily, or they can understand things very easily. They grasp and immediately know what's going on, and they know about so many fields, and you barely are able to, for example, master even one field. These sort of things are real. They happen around us. So if you're feeling something against a person, then see, all of this are blessings from Allah on that person. So we have no right to not like that. We have no right to object to that. We have no right to want something different to that. And perhaps their kids, somebody else's kids, get top marks in school, and maybe your kids don't. Or maybe their kids are obedient and your kids are not. These sort of things are very common. So what is clear is that we cannot be envious of those people and their situation and the blessings that they are enjoying, or on a person's obedience to Allah. Okay, this quite often happens as well. There's a group of people, they're all, for example, not following Islam very well, and one person suddenly starts to follow, so that it builds jealousy and envy with other people. So rather than them trying to imitate and be like that person, oh, okay, alhamdulillah, that has happened to him, and inshallah we can do it as well, and so on. the people become envious. So these are just some examples that I put up so that like we can start to think in our own lives. There are countless examples of these things, and unfortunately, what happens is, by the time we're able to see it from another person, that means their heart is full of it to such a level that it has spilled out over onto their tongue or onto their limbs, and they're actually doing something about it, maybe talking about it, that they're not happy about a certain thing. So what we need to work on is to not even have this in the first place. Realize the main thing here, which is Allah has decreed blessing on somebody else. A blessing or many blessings. And then envy means you're not happy with that. That's actually what it boils down to. So if you picture it, if you think about it, then you realize actually it's a very bad thing, and I should never be envious of anyone for any blessings that they have. This is the reality of it. Now, the interesting thing about envy is that, as some of the scholars pointed out, hardly anyone is safe from it. Hardly anyone is safe from it. But the length of the evil thought that comes to the mind, that's where the good people are separated from the bad people. Okay, the length of a certain negative thought in the heart. So there are two possibilities. Well, that's a rough breakdown of two possibilities. So let's look into it. So I called it the length of hasad. Okay, so the first one is an initial thought that comes when you see or hear a blessing. Just an initial negative thought that you might have in your mind. So this one is not a problem if there are certain conditions that are met, which is if you immediately repel it and you don't go on with that initial thought, and you do not want such thoughts. It's like you actually hate these evil thoughts to come to your mind, to come to your heart, and you dislike them. So your nature is something else, and you dislike these things. And finally, if you make dua for the other person, like may Allah preserve that blessing for him or her, may Allah increase them in blessings, may Allah preserve them, may Allah, that sort of stuff. So if you're doing these things, then that initial thought that came to your mind but has gone because you immediately repelled it, then that's not a problem, inshallah. And this is the one that scholars said that happens to a lot of people, that initial thought. But there are good people in the society who are able to repel it immediately. But the second one is the problematic one, a thought that you indulge in and build upon. So shaitan put that inside you, that somebody got a raise, somebody's got memorized the Quran or whatever, somebody else's kid is doing really well. Suddenly you have something inside you. But if you repelled it, that would have been good. That was the first. But if you didn't, you're in the second category. And that's the blameworthy category. That's the one that you could be falling into the sin. And that's the one that can lead you to thinking a lot about it, that blessing that the person has gotten, and you might even start to go down a path of planning something evil. So thinking about it is you won't really go down a path of planning evil unless you've already been thinking about it a lot. So don't think about it negatively. It should be Allah decided it, Allah gave it. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something like that to you. Do not wish somebody else to lose it. Do not wish somebody else to lose it. Let them have it, but you make dua to Allah. Oh Allah, give that to me as well, or make me have this, or make me have that. Okay, like Zakaria alayhi salam in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, when he asks Maryam alayhi salam about the food that she's always been getting, suddenly what does he do? He doesn't get jealous. He makes dua to Allah. Immediately when she gives her answer, Zakaria alayhi salam turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and makes a dua. So that's what we're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be content with that and turning to Allah, because just like Allah gave it to the other person, Allah can give it to you as well. This is all a test. So if you go down the path of thinking a lot about it, oh, why him, not me, why her, not me, and my family, etc., etc. If you go down thinking that, then you might start to make plans. Now, the plan doesn't have to be as evil as, for example, you're trying to take that blessing away from a person. You could even be trying to, let's say someone's kid has done something, I don't know, there's a certain test at school and they aced it or something, and your son or daughter is in their class, but they didn't, or they may have even failed, or they didn't get that mark. So people are talking about it. So you try to belittle it by saying, "Oh, that test actually wasn't so difficult," or "Yeah, it was just a practice test. That's why I didn't get my son or daughter to study too much. What a waste of time." So you're trying to actually do something to take the credit away from the other person. So all of this, it's not required. If you put the blessing in perspective, it's from Allah. Allah has chosen to give it to that person. Okay, and you can have something similar if you turn to Allah, because He is the giver of everything. If you don't have all of these clean thoughts, proper thoughts, then everything can be fine for you, and you can even enjoy that yourself. And if you go down these and you don't get it, like you make dua to Allah sincerely, and maybe Allah tests you and He doesn't give you that, so then you actually realize, because your head is in the proper place, that Allah decided not for me right now. And Allah is the one who decides when to give something to some people, or what to give or what not to give. We make dua and we want things at a certain time, generally speaking, or very often. And we get sad and disappointed when we don't get it. But Allah knows what's good for us, and He'll give things to us when it is good for us. If you think about the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, it's a very famous example of this. When Yusuf alayhi salam was framed and then put in jail, he wanted to get out. And then that famous incident happened with the two other prisoners, the inmates that came in, and he wanted to get out of jail. So he said to one of them, mention me to your king, and so on. So obviously he wanted to come out. But had he come out at that point in time, he would have probably come out and would have been a slave like he was just before he went in. He was serving his master. Okay, because remember, they didn't realize him as a prophet, so they were treating him like a slave. So he would have been that. But then Allah decided he stays in jail for a lot longer, until a time came when they needed someone like him and his expertise and his dream interpretation and his solution to that major problem that was coming. So not only did he just come out of jail, he came out and became like at the head of the Khaza'in, all of those, the Treasury Department, for example, if you want to call it that. So subhanAllah, had he come out long earlier, he would have gone back into life of slavery. But Allah decided, no, there wasn't no time for him to come out later, and he came out in a much better position. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides things. He knows everything. When we acknowledge that He is Al-Alim, believe in it. Don't just do lip service to it. And when we say, like, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rahim, most merciful. So believe in it. Don't just do lip service. So if He's Rahim, then He gave it to a blessing to somebody else and not to you. That's part of His rahmah. That's part of His ilm, His knowledge. And then He is al-adl as well, that He is just. Okay? So He does things according to His justice. And He's never going to oppress or wrong anyone. Remember that. Okay? No matter what the shaitan tells you, remember that. All right. The next thing that was prohibited in this hadith is something called inflation of prices. So what does this actually mean? This is in an auction situation. Okay? So where you raise prices at an auction when you don't want to buy the item. It could be as big as like house auctions or any other item that's being auctioned. So what happens is everyone's starting to bid. And then you who do not want to purchase the item, you start bidding as well. So you're raising the price. So this usually happens for two reasons. Either you want to harm the real buyer, or you want to help the seller get a higher price. So maybe the item is only like $50, but you come in and you try to raise it a little bit, and the other person does the counter bid and so on. So you take it up to 55. So it's only worth 50, but because the other person was really desperate for it, you artificially inflated it and made it sell for 55. So you help the seller. Or you might have an enmity against the buyer. So you think, no, I don't want this person to get this house, for example, nice and cheaply. No, I'm going to raise it. I don't want it, but I'm going to raise it such that he has to pay a lot more than what he would have normally paid. So this again is not permissible. It's building enmity. You're acting on your hatred, or you're acting on your unjustified love of the seller, and so on. So we can't harm each other. Just when we're going through this, as I said earlier at the start, think about how Islam is perfect, how Islam doesn't want any evil to happen in the society. It's truly amazing. The things, see, whenever, remember this thing, this is very important rule that scholars have pointed out, including Shaykh Sa'di, for example, rahimahullah. He said that when Allah has ordered us to do something, it is either purely good or the good of it outweighs the harm in it. That's in the obligatory or recommended items. And the opposite is true as well. If Allah prohibited us, or the Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from something, then either it is completely and fully evil, or the evil in it outweighs the minor good there might be in it. Okay, so remember that, because a lot of people, when they come across, for example, a lot of the prohibitions, they say, oh, why did Allah or the Prophet ﷺ prohibit this, but I can see this good in it? Okay, maybe you can see one good in it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His knowledge, there's like 50 bad in it. But in our deficient knowledge, we just think, nope, it's only one or two good, and so on. And we base it on that. So this is the artificial raising of prices, again, not permissible, because it builds hatred and problems in the community. Then the Prophet ﷺ also said, do not hate one another. And the hadith also, by those wordings, the scholars said in their explanations, that it includes things that, so it's not just hating as well, but it's also things that lead to hate, such as backbiting, slander, and namima. So these by themselves are sins, and these they're not really related to hatred directly, but you engaging in this and the people finding out and so on, this leads you down the path of hatred. Or if the other person finds out, it leads them to the path of hating you very badly. So backbiting, as the Prophet ﷺ said, it's you mentioning somebody else behind their back when they're not there, something that they dislike. Now remember, it is not sufficient for you to think, oh, I am, what I'm saying is true and accurate about them, so it's okay. No, because the Prophet ﷺ said, if what you're saying, the thing that they don't like about themselves, if what you're saying about them behind their back, if that is true, that is backbiting. That's a haram. But if it's false what you're saying, that's a different haram. That's slander. So both are haram. You can't say just because I'm speaking the truth, it's okay. No, truth could be backbiting. So you have to be careful. And then the final one, namima. Namima is you taking, like you heard something in one conversation, someone talking about somebody else, for example, then you take that conversation to the other person and say, did you know that this person is talking about you behind your back and so on, with the intention that you want problems between them. So that's namima, and that's another big sin as well. So these are just some examples of things that can lead to hate, and so we're not supposed to be engaging in it. So anything that causes hatred among the Muslim community, that is to be stopped at any cost. Now, undercutting one another. So that was another thing the Prophet also mentioned was undercutting one another. So this has like two scenarios. Now picture, first one is a seller goes out to a buyer after the sale from a different seller and says, I will sell you the same for a lesser price. Okay, so I don't know, so let's say in today's day and age, it could be, I don't know, someone trying to buy an iPad and someone buys it from seller A for $1,000 and the sale's finished and everything. And then you find out and you tell the person, no, why'd you buy it for 1,000? Like give it back, I'll give it to you for 900 or something. So this sort of thing can build enmity. And similarly, the opposite way, the second scenario, a buyer goes out to a seller and says, like, who sold an item to somebody else and says, I'll buy that from you for a higher price than what you sold it to the other person. So these build enmities, because like what happens is, this is when you're intentionally going after it and targeting in this way, not like what we have today, for example. You might buy something from Meyer, and then you find out later on JB Hi-Fi has an advertisement that they sold it, that they're selling it for a different price. That's different. Here we're talking about like people are intending this Because this one, doing it like this, builds enmity. Because then you think, hang on, I just came out from seller A, and he told me, or she told me, that, this item, they reduced it so much and they're giving it to me, at cost price. And yet this guy is able to give it to me for $100 less. How is that possible? So that guy was lying. What a bad Muslim he is, and what a bad person she is. So it can lead down a very negative path, an undesired path. So that's why anything that leads down that path, we're not supposed to do. Okay? And finally, the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, be, O slaves of Allah, as brothers. So firstly, the Prophet ﷺ called us slaves of Allah, which is the reality. So this tells us that we must listen to our master, who is our creator. So had he just said, for example, be as brothers, that's one thing. That would have meant we have to follow him as well, because that's his command. But he added something. He called us out by saying, O slaves of Allah, meaning like this is Allah's ruling on this matter, that he wants us to be like brothers. So be brothers to listen and in obedience to Allah's original command. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, yeah, Allah made us brothers, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Allah made all of us brothers and sisters. Nobody else did. So you like it or not, that's the situation, and you better like it, because that means you're showing that you're content with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided and decreed, and then work with it. And then, as brothers, this indicates that believers must act like, blood brothers. So, generally speaking, 99.9% of the time, blood brothers will care for each other. Or I'm saying with blood sisters, okay, they're not going to trick each other. They're not going to be jealous of each other. They're not going to, inflate price to harm each other. They're not going to be envious of each other. Correct? So then we should be like that, all of us. So, subhanAllah, just calling out in this way, it's supposed to make us reflect on this, so that it's an extra driving force on doing the instructions in the hadith, and also makes us realize like why we're supposed to be doing this. We're supposed to be like brothers. Now imagine if we were implementing these things and other instructions that we will do next time, inshallah. What a harmonious society that we would have, with very few problems. And the problems would only come if anyone or some people broke these injunctions. But implementing it, you would not have problem. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, got to remember, where is this coming from that I'm saying? Allah created us. Allah knows us. Allah knows how we think, like as humans, what humans are, what their nature is, etc., etc. Nothing that's ever happening with 7 billion people on earth today, with so many trillions of scenarios that could have happened and so on, all of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And nobody else knows it happened. So we should listen to what he wants us to do. Okay, this is where I will stop for today. I spent a bit of extra time on this particular hadith because it had a number of prohibitions, and they're all very related to our situation and our times today. And you can see how many people are falling into sin with regards to a lot of this. Now, Jazakallah khair. So if anyone